Well, we're thrilled to have the opportunity this afternoon to be talking to Professor John Kindt, and on the phone we have Phil Blevins. Let me tell you a little bit about Professor Kindt. He was a professor of business and legal policy at the University of Illinois, and he is well known as the senior editor of the United States International Gambling Report. He's considered one of the foremost experts on gambling in the United States. And I was looking at your educational background, John. I don't want to embarrass you, but I just—
Oh, please do, please.
Okay. Well, I was highly impressed, and I want folks to know, you're well qualified to discuss this subject. You have so many letters after your name. I just had to count the letters in your name. You actually have more letters after your name than in your name. And you have you're an old Virginia boy. You went to the College of William and Mary. You also earned a graduate's degree in law. You got a BA in business. You got a graduate degree in law, an MBA from the University of Georgia, and from the University of Virginia. And you also worked in the federal government, and you served as a professor at the University of Illinois. And so you've spent about 30 years on this subject of gambling, various forms of gambling. So, matter of fact, the first time I ever heard your name was almost exactly 2 years ago. I was talking to two lawyers from Richmond, Virginia, and we were talking about the possibility of a casino coming to Southwest Virginia, and they brought up your name, and they said he is the foremost expert on the subject of gambling that you can get a hold of. And I tried to get them to make contact with you, and they were just too busy to do that. And so somehow I found your number, and I just knew you wouldn't even have time to talk to me, but you've been very gracious, and I appreciate that. And I appreciate your concern about the problems of gambling. Also, on the phone is Phil Blevins. Phil serves as one of the elders of the Abingdon Church of Christ. He is an outstanding Bible student and an outstanding teacher and communicator of God's word. So we're going to approach this from two sides. We're going to be looking at the pragmatic standpoint, what a casino would mean to the economics of Southwest Virginia, but we're also going to be looking at the biblical, moral, ethical aspects of it as well. And I think informed voters need to consider all of these factors. So I want to start off, Professor Kindt. Our area as a whole is really hurting. We've lost manufacturing jobs, lots and lots of manufacturing jobs, and then the coal industry has virtually collapsed from where it was just a few years ago. Bristol, Virginia is legitimately in a financial crisis, and how they got there is immaterial really right now to this discussion, but they're in a financial crisis. And so the argument is this would be a great way to grow the economy in Southwest Virginia. And to that you would say?
Well, we had the same thing approach us over 30 years ago in the state of Illinois. While I was a professor at the University of Illinois for 34 years. And the governor asked my colleagues and myself to take a look at this. Sounds great. But after about 15 minutes, several of my professor colleagues and myself looked around the table and we said, this is a con. This isn't going to work. This is going to make everything worse. Everything becomes worse. And I've got a little newspaper thing here. There's not a reputable economist in the country who will say that this is going to work for you on a regional basis. And this is just one example. We've got books and books on this, but here's just an old newspaper report. It says 40 economists agree on this. Now, can you get 40 economists to agree on anything? Well, they agree on this. This is a no-brainer. And so what's the solution? Well, the solution is to do what Warren Buffett and Howard Buffett did in their hometown, Omaha, Nebraska, when the casinos said, we're going to come and we're going to save you. We're going to make everyone prosperous. Well, what they did is they said no. Mayor Hal Dobb, who later served in Congress, said no. And what they did is they had an old racetrack called Exarban Racetrack, and it was failing. And they said, okay, we've got hundreds of acres here. Let's just tear it down and build a casino. And of course, the casino people promised everything under the sun. Everybody's going to be rich. You know, advertising is going to be rich. The media is going to be rich. And the Buffetts, business people, said, this isn't going to work. The economists said, this isn't going to work. And fortunately, they had a government that did their homework and looked at the academics and looked at the studies and said, this isn't going to work. And so what they did is they did tear down the racetrack, and instead they built condominiums. They built an extension of the University of Nebraska at Omaha. They built entertainment complexes. They turned it into a $500 million consumer-oriented area, which is flourishing and making everybody prosper in that area. And here's the irony of irony. This is so basic that the University of Nebraska, their new business school, their new business college, actually is now built on the old proposed casino site. It's just amazing what these fake economics can get away with from these people from Nevada who are coming in behind the local people to establish this casino gambling.
You know, as a matter of fact, I would, folks who are watching this, let me encourage you, get on YouTube and just type in casinos and Warren Buffett, and you'll find him speaking out against this. And here's a man with money, and he likes to make money, and there's certainly nothing wrong with that. And he says it won't work. And so,
well, if I may add, in the United States International Gambling Report, which you mentioned, there are hundreds of reprinted government reports, economics reports that says this doesn't work. And we actually, here's just one example. This is one of the multi-volume work. You can tell just by looking at the spine, it's 1,500 plus pages. And in one of these volumes, we have reprinted the speeches of Warren Buffett and his son Howard Buffett, billionaires, who said this doesn't work. As a matter of fact, I think one of the volumes here has a dedication to Howard Buffett in it. They know the numbers here. This is just going to make everything worse. And we can talk about the social problems later, but I don't want to monopolize what Phil has to say or you.
No, that's good. Well, you know, and you hit on what they did in Nebraska. You know, one of the big appeals here is we are a tourist area. We have people come through for hiking. Bristol, Virginia, Tennessee is the birthplace of country music. And so we're just going to enhance all this tourism. And mom and pop restaurants are counting on the fact that people are going to come into the casino and they're going to be looking for the best barbecue joint in town, and they're going to go there. And it's just going to have this ripple effect and help everyone in the area. Is that what you found in your studies?
Well, let me preface my response by saying I worked for Congressman Caldwell Butler up out of Roanoke, Virginia. And also had dealings, of course, with Congressman William Wampler, terrific gentleman when he was in Congress, and good friends with Congressman Bob Goodlatte out of Roanoke, Virginia for the last about 30 years. And they got it. And back in 1994, we passed, and actually it was after hearings in 1995, they passed the National Gambling Impact Study Commission. And this was supported by virtually the entire Virginia congressional delegation. And again, it confirms what we said. This doesn't work. Now, with regard to tourism, back in 1994, I remember coming down to Richmond, And the casino people had literally put on retainer every lobbying group in Richmond, with the exception of two, who were morally and ethically oriented more than some of the others, and so that they wouldn't have any opposition. And I remember speaking back in the 1990s before the major hospitality and tourism groups in Virginia. Virginia's tourism is the second biggest industry that there is in Virginia. And Busch Gardens got it, Williamsburg got it, all the tourism people from across the state got it. They realized that this was going to cannibalize pre-existing tourism. As a matter of fact, they're arguing there in your area that this is going to help tourism, as you just said. But down in Florida, the largest tourism state in the country, they have done multiple reports documenting that this is going to be a it's going to cannibalize the pre-existing tourism industry. And Charles Dussel was the Secretary of Commerce of the state of Florida. Both Governor Jeb Bush and Governor Lawton Chiles, when they were governors there back in the 1990s, they rejected the casinos coming to Florida. It's lose-lose for everybody except the casino owners. And by the way, if you're gambling in a casino, you're losing. Mm-hmm. Over time, there's no statistical way that you can come out ahead.
Right. Hey, Phil, if you can hear me, let me ask you a question here real quickly. From an economic standpoint, it doesn't make sense, but why do religious folks even care? I mean, this is a Bristol issue. Matter of fact, we've been reminded many times, Bristol residents have a right to vote on this. We shouldn't even be concerned. And I'm going to follow up with you, John, on that in a second. But why should religious folks even care what Bristol does?
Well, I think everyone needs to realize that Christians and citizens, and they are citizens that are concerned about people in a sound society, have to be concerned about those things that are detrimental to society anywhere they occur. We could say that that it might be isolated to Southwest or to Bristol, and Bristol's not an island. Bristol doesn't have a wall built around it that keeps its influence in and keeps citizens of Washington County surrounding it from being affected by it. But even if that were the case, I think as people that are concerned about a sound society, which we all want, that we have to be concerned about issues that are detrimental to the people in society and ultimately affect the foundation of the whole country.
John, as far as the effects of a casino, what we happen to be, I'm sitting in my study 7 miles from the city of Bristol, Virginia. What will the ripple effects of a casino be for the surrounding area?
Well, basically the casino has what they call the 30-mile feeder market and the 50-mile feeder market. And basically they're just taking money out of that 30-mile radius and that 50-mile radius. The problem is it's just money coming out of pre-existing businesses. It's coming out of pre-existing sales and the consumer economy. And the social costs, well, the overall bottom line is that the cost benefits, there are some benefits, but the costs are $3 to $7 for every $1 in benefits. So if government's getting $1, they're paying $3 or more out the back for social costs. Now, what are those social costs? Well, remember, gambling is a recognized addiction pursuant to the American Psychiatric Association. It is the first behavioral addiction. And so there are the ABCs of social costs. A stands for new addicts, like drug addiction. I mean, you want to open up a cocaine parlor downtown, you're going to bring in a lot of money, but the social costs are going to be overwhelming. Same thing with gambling. B stands for new bankruptcies, up 18 to 42% as people dump their money into the casino instead of buying cars, refrigerators, and other consumer goods, and including the essentials of life. We see around casinos that people are spending 10% less on food, 25% less on clothing, 37% have raided their bank accounts in order to gamble and dump the money into the slot machines. And the C stands for new crime and corruption. The new crime, according to definitive Harvard MIT study, it goes up 10% per year, every year, as people lose their money and resort to crime. So this is, if you look at other jurisdictions, you'll find all kinds of problems, which are hidden by the casinos and by the gambling companies, of course. But when they say this is win-win, it's only win-win for them. It's lose-lose for everybody else over time. And let me address one other thing, the jobs, before we forget. Casinos today are not about James Bond coming in a tuxedo. Your casino is going to be slot machines, slot machines, slot machines. Slot machines are known, according to the congressional report and throughout psychology, as the crack cocaine of addicting new people to gambling. And for each one of these slot machines, they're taking in a minimum of $100,000 per year. That's $100,000 that's not going into cars, refrigerators, and is not contributing to the economic multiplier. And so for each slot machine, I don't know how many your casino says they're going to have, 250, 500, you're going to be losing that number of jobs every year out of the local economy. So this is just going to make everything worse.
Well, that's interesting you'd bring that up. I was going to share with you the numbers that are being put out there. The investors promised a creation of 2,000 jobs to begin with, 3,000 by year 5, and more than 5,200 by the operation's 7th year. And you've addressed that somewhat. So you're losing, for every slot machine, you're losing a job per year, every single year.
Every single year. And I would call that fake economics, because they'll promise you anything. There are lots of numbers out there that they'll make up that are not credible. Yes, you will have some jobs coming in, particularly with construction, but once the construction's done, that's done. And slot machines don't create jobs. 90% of the money going into most casinos is coming out of slot machines. And if you go down to North Carolina on the tribal land, you'll see that all they have are slot machines. And slot machines don't create jobs. You just dust them off and collect the money. There's no jobs there.
The other promise is that the city of Bristol, Virginia will get $26.8 million a year after the casino's 7th year. $26 million, boy, that sounds like big, big money.
Wait a minute, excuse me for interrupting. That is peanuts. And after the 7th year, that's ridiculous. This is a con on the people of Bristol. Let me give you an example. The first 10 casinos that came to the state of Illinois, each casino license to the state of Illinois was worth $500 million. So the state of Illinois at that time, 30 years ago, had a $5 billion, they're going to bring in the casinos, fine, charge them the license fee. You go to Wall Street and say, I've got a casino license, they'll give you $500 million up front. I mean, that's how much it's worth. How much is Bristol getting out of that? Let me just say, in Illinois, the state of Illinois got $25,000, I think, for a casino license. They gave away $500 million in casino license for each one of the casinos they had. And each casino, once it's open, makes a net profit, pure profit, of approximately $1 million a day. $1 million a day. Now, and Bristol is only going to get 20-some million dollars after 7 years? The casino's going to walk away with $2-3 billion in that time frame. And this is unbelievable. I'm really, as an old Virginian, I'm outraged. I can't believe this is such a lousy deal. Even if you have the casino, it's such a lousy deal for the people of the area.
What about the cost to the city of Bristol? I mean, are they really going to be getting positive income off of the casino, or are there going to be hidden costs that are going to eat that up?
Well, yeah. Well, no matter what you have coming in, the social costs outweigh the new addicted gamblers, the new bankruptcies, the new crime and corruption will outweigh the benefits that are coming in. Now, in some states, they actually have some benefits coming in, and the costs are about $3 in cost for every $1 in benefits. But what you've told me about Bristol and what I know about the general area and the proposal is that your costs are going to be $7 or $8 for every $1 in benefits, maybe more. I mean, this is unconscionable. And I'm as an old Virginia, I'm just pretty outraged that the government of the area would be involved in something like this. And by the way, the Columbia Journalism Review said, follow the money. Follow the money. And you should ask everybody, do you have direct or indirect financial connections with this proposal? And my colleagues and myself, by the way, have never taken any money for or consultant fees for promoting the academics on this. And again, that would be an anathema to us as academics, bipartisan academics on both sides of the aisle. My colleagues and I regularly testify before Congress under oath. So these numbers are correct. And if they were incorrect, we'd be in real trouble. Now, you won't get the casino people testifying under oath with regard to these types of numbers because they know they can't document them.
You know, let me say a couple of things, because I can imagine someone listening to this, a couple of objections that they would come up with. Number one, the promoters, two promoters, they have a really good reputation in this area. People, you know, I don't know their heart, but I know their past. They've done a lot of charitable things. They've helped the area. But I find it interesting that they've already turned the management, assuming that it all happens and the referendum passes. They've turned the management over to the Hard Rock Cafe people, Hard Rock restaurant people will be running the casino. And, you know, regardless of the intentions of the promoters, Hard Rock is not in this as a benevolent operation by any stretch of the imagination.
Well, back in 1994, when I came to as an expert before the Virginia legislature and was joined by a lot of the tourist industry, which was against the casinos, they were proposed for Williamsburg, Virginia, for Richmond, for Roanoke. Now they're trying to pick off the smaller communities that are more desperate. The larger communities didn't go for it, even though virtually 98% of the lobbyists in Richmond were in favor of the casino because they were on the casino payroll. And at that time, the person I was debating was actually a war hero who was being used by the casino proposals to provide a good image in favor of the casino gambling. But he didn't know anything about gambling. He was simply going to sell out at some point to the casinos, which is a common tactic. And it's nothing against this gentleman. I don't even remember his name. And it's nothing against any of these people who are pushing this idea, but it's a common tactic of the industry to have people provide a good public image on their behalf for a major financial contribution, and then sell out and leave it in the hands of the Nevada people or the Atlantic City people. And they'll be running the show. And the gambling has to continue to grow because it's not producing anything. It's just taking money out of your economy. So you have to have more and more gambling. And so in Illinois, from 30 years ago when we had the first 10 casinos, we now have more slot machines than Nevada. We've got slot machines in scuba shops. We've got slot machines in floral shops. We've got slot machines everywhere. And they're still expanding because the industry has basically taken over local and even state government. Do you really want to follow Illinois? Virginia, I love Virginia. Don't do it.
I want to point out, you left Illinois, didn't you?
Yeah, yes, we're retiring out of Illinois to another state, in Georgia actually, which has no gambling. I just gave a presentation before their major business group in downtown Atlanta. They have the best industry-friendly economy in the country. Everybody's moving to Georgia because of that. And a major reason is they don't have the casinos, and it's going to be very tough for the casinos to get through the Georgia legislature. And businesses know that. We actually did studies on this in Illinois. We said, what will attract Fortune 500 companies? And gambling, Fortune 500 CEOs know all of this. They don't want their employees with the new addicted gambling, the bankruptcies, the crime. They've got enough HR problems already. They're moving to non-gambling areas, just like the Buffetts in Omaha, Nebraska, tearing down the casino proposal, building consumer-friendly entertainment, condos, and educational facilities. That's where businesses want to locate. They want to locate in family-friendly environments.
Phil, if you're still on the line, and I'm going to voice something to you that I've heard and get your opinion on this. So a religious person says, I'm not going to support the casino. I don't think it's good. I don't think people should be gambling, but I'm not going to oppose it because most of the people in the community want a casino. How do we reconcile that attitude? I'm not for it, but I'm not going to oppose it.
Well, there might be some issues in life where you can be non-committal, but when it comes to moral issues, you take a side, either actively or by default, because Jesus said at one point in his ministry, he said, "He that's not for me is against me." And we could go to Romans chapter 1, verses 28 through 30, which in that case, where Paul was talking about moral issues, he said that those that did those things were condemned, but not only those that did those things, but those that had pleasure in them that did those things. So we don't actually have to participate to be agreeable to something, and to not take a stand against something is in effect to take a stand for it when it comes to moral issues.
It's an amazing thing as I began looking at the data, and to me it's a no-brainer. People are being hurt by all forms of gambling, but especially casino gambling, the slot machines. People are being hurt. My son went to a conference in Las Vegas, and he called me up from Las Vegas, and first time he'd ever been there. He called me up and he said, "Dad, you're not going to believe this." He said, every morning, these tourist buses, they line up, and these old people are getting off the buses, and they're on their walkers and on their canes, and they're hobbling into the casino. And it just broke his heart because, all you do is you see the people, but apparently they're running these buses different places to pick up these senior citizens who you would suspect that the vast majority of them do not have a lot of disposable income, but yet the casinos don't really care about that, do they? John?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. One of my former students, law students, actually published a law review article on this, and it was featured in the American Association of Retired Persons magazine. And they're called the Golden Grays. And the problem is, once senior citizens lose their money, they can't recoup it. And they get poorer and poorer and poorer. And people ask, why are you involved in this? And I said, it's such an obvious economic disaster. I can't see, and it's promoted by all this gambling money. I mean, it's totally counter to rigorous academics. It's counter to social justice issues. It's counter to ethical and many of the religious issues, denominations. We had a amicus brief before the U.S. Supreme Court, not I myself, but a group that I've advised over the years, and they had all these denominations against gambling on this amicus brief to the U.S. Supreme Court, including, I found remarkably, the Islamic Society of North America. They had Christian groups, conservative groups, social justice groups, bipartisan, all across the board. And they had so many on there, they couldn't get everyone on to it. They had to say, I'm sorry, we're going to miss the deadline. We can't put you on here. And I remember Congressman Frank Wolf, a Virginia congressman, who read into the congressional record 220, more than 220 religious organizations. Now, these were just, I believe, mostly religious organizations, which were opposed to the spread of gambling throughout the United States. And the one thing I mentioned, the congressional U.S. National Gambling Impact Study Commission, it said there should be a moratorium on the expansion of casinos and all this type of gambling everywhere in the United States, all types of gambling. And of course, the gambling guys just continued to work on the state legislatures and got it through. I've got a little cartoon here that kind of summarizes this a little bit. Legislators just say, this is a little parody of a well-known legislator promoting gambling issues. And here's another one. This one is from Georgia, where the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, I think, is where this was printed. They get it, and it shows how the legislature is taking all the money and trying to convince the taxpayers that this is good for them. And a final one, this one's out of Illinois, with all the expansion of Illinois we mentioned earlier. And this is City Hall in Chicago. They now call it the marijuana and casino capital for the City Hall in Chicago. So if you troll around for some of these cartoons, you'll see that people do get it. The problem is that the casinos have spent billions and billions of dollars dumbing down the public perception. And it's really too bad that this has occurred.
You know, there's another aspect to this, pragmatic aspect, and that is there are so many regional casinos now. If let's just forget about the moral issues for just a second, just from a pragmatic situation, we've reached saturation, haven't we?
Well, several jurisdictions have. Probably one of the best to look at is, for example, Atlantic City. Every couple of years or so, half of the casinos are in bankruptcy. And then what the casino people do is they just move they sell out to another casino owner, some of their friends, and they walk away with a profit. If they get into a corruption type of problem, they just swap casinos. And that whitewashes the situation. We talked a little bit earlier about academics. Our faculty senate at the University of Illinois, which was a faculty senator for 40 years, and they virtually unanimously said, get rid of these slot machines around the academic communities. This is their resolution. And the students did the same thing. The students passed, their student senate passed a resolution that said virtually the same thing. This doesn't work, and we don't want them around here. But of course, the government slowly forced in the slot machines around the campus, regardless of public opinion, regardless of the voters, actually. It's a top-down manipulation of the government system. And that gets my political science colleagues upset. It gets our economists, our business people. This is just a wonderful topic that we can all agree on. And the numbers are actually worse than many of the numbers that I've given you here today.
You know, really, it doesn't matter what you are politically or religiously. If you care about just common sense on economics, you should be against it. If you care about people, you should be against it. I want to deal with a couple of the quibbles that people have sometimes. And Phil, one of the quibbles that I've heard quite often is all of life's a gamble. how can you say this is wrong? When you get in your car to drive to work, you're taking a gamble.
Well, what I would say to that, that there are risks in all of life, but that doesn't equate to gambling like we're talking about. You know, if I invest in a business to try to start up a business, there's obviously going to be some risks in that. But in that case, the goal on both parts is mutual benefit. And as Dr. Kindt said earlier in his discussion, the goal of the casino is for you not to benefit, but for you to lose. And so it's an entirely different thing to equate risk in life to gambling in a casino.
Absolutely. Well, you know, Dr. Kindt, sometimes we talked a little bit about this before we started recording. People will come back again just to quibble. Well, you know, the stock market's a gamble, and people do the stock market all the time. I don't hear you speak out against the stock market.
It's an investment risk. That's why we go to college. We want to learn about risk and how to manage risk and how to grow over time but gambling is an artificial risk. There's nothing there. It's lose-lose for the person over time. I mean, I invest in the stock market, and sometimes my stocks go up, sometimes they go down. Over time, though, you should come out ahead in the stock market. Over time in the casino, it's lose-lose. You're not going to come out ahead. And do you remember that commercial with the little 1-year-old kid? He was an advertisement for a major investment firm, and he was sitting next to a guy who was gambling, and the little baby was there. Cute commercial. Was talking about, you know, you've got a better chance of winning the lottery than, you know, finding a polar bear on the moon or some bizarre thing. And what the investment firm's telling you is, don't throw your money away on this. Put it into investments. And it's a great commercial. You can find it on the web if you look it up.
You know, along that line, I hadn't intended to bring this up, but it is, you mentioned a moment ago, it's terrible that our state and local government is involved in this, because this is really regressive, and it hurts the most vulnerable of our communities. And if you would address that for a minute, I know this happens regarding the lottery, which people think are great because it helps schools. And they think, you know, nobody's holding a gun to your head. If you want to go into a casino, that's your business. But it preys upon the weakest people of our community, doesn't it?
Yes, I was just going into my shirt pocket here, looking for another news, or jacket pocket, looking for another news clip. But it's a front page story with Jesse Jackson, Martin Luther King Day, his speech in Chicago, Illinois. And he basically says gambling is the new chains, quote unquote, of economic slavery. Now, that's not a dramatic statement today, but a few years ago when he said that, that was dramatic. That was front page news. And it makes poor people poorer. We talked about already that around casinos, people are spending 10% less on food, 25% less on clothing, 37% have gone into their bank accounts in order to gamble. It's draining bank accounts, and it just hurts people across the board. And where this is going, and I think people know this instinctively, is the industry is after your kids. I've got 13 grandkids. They're after your kids, they're after your grandkids. Newsweek gets it. And actually, there are several members of the federal government that get it. And they're trying to stop the industry from putting gambling on every cell phone. They're trying to stop it from being in every living room, at every work desk, at every school desk. And that was actually recommended by the National Gambling Impact Study Commission, the Congressional Commission, years ago, and was agreed to by virtually the entire Virginia congressional delegation, both sides of the aisle. So this is a great topic for me academically and for my colleagues academically, because it's so bipartisan. It's just the facts versus money from Nevada. And what can money from Nevada do. And the money from Nevada's into Virginia, and they want Virginia. They want it all.
And this is one of the great myths, is that we're going to have all this money from outside the area coming in, and it's going to stay here. But that's both of those premises are false, aren't they?
Yeah, just the opposite. The money's going to leave the area. Well, what are they going to do with the slot after they get $1 million a day profit now out of these slot machines in the casino coming into, what are they going to do with that money? Well, they'll put a little bit into charity here and a little bit there, but most of that money is just going to leave the area.
And
as that money leaves the area, there's no multiplier effect for Bristol. Us economists, trained people talk about the multiplier effect. If you spend money on cars, refrigerators, on consumer goods, that multiplies, and that's what people think is going to happen with gambling. No, it's just the opposite. It reduces. Right. So you're killing your consumer multiplier effect. Every slot machine takes in $100,000 per year. That's $300,000 in lost consumer spending because of the multiplier effect. And if you take $300,000 out of my pharmacy, $300,000 out of my clothing store, out of my local department store, that's a lost job. If I've lost $300,000 in sales because of a slot machine, I'm going to cut back my workforce. It's really easy math.
Yeah. Bill, let me ask you one more question. So the person that says, but it's going to help, let's just pretend for a minute it will help. And this is going to mean money and jobs, and Bristol, Virginia is going to be solvent. And I don't believe that. Professor Kindt's pointed out the statistics do not back that up. But let's just pretend for a minute that it would. Would that give us justification to say, hey, look, let's just go ahead and do it. It's going to help?
Well, if that would be the case, we could justify anything. And there's an old saying that which proves too much proves nothing. If the end is or if the end justifies the means, we could do anything. As Dr. Kindt mentioned earlier, we could open up a cocaine parlor, an opium den, or we could set up some houses of prostitution in Bristol, or whatever we wanted to draw in people to make money. But ultimately, as he's so eloquently pointed out, the cost associated with that is far beyond any benefit, not to mention the moral dilemma that involves. It's just wrong regardless, and things that are wrong are not made right by some end that someone thinks is beneficial to someone.
I'm gonna start with you, Phil. Is there anything in conclusion that you'd like to say that you think folks need to consider?
I just hope that people are willing to look at the evidence, because the evidence is so tremendous against this thing, regardless of whether you look at it from a spiritual side or just from the standpoint of does it work side, whether you have any moral stand on it or not. I just hope people are willing to look at the evidence rather than listen to the advertisements and listen to the propaganda. I hope they're willing to listen and take a deep, hard look at the evidence and do what's best for this community, which is obviously not to support casino gambling.
Professor Kindt, any final words that you'd like to share?
All that glitters is not gold, and this is fool's gold, and it's going to hurt the community. As an old Virginian, growing up in Virginia, I love Virginia. I love the Shenandoah Valley. I love the educational system there. But I don't want to be anywhere around the gambling because of the social costs, the new addicted gamblers, the new bankruptcies, the new crime. I'm glad that most of our family is now in Georgia, away from that, in a family-friendly environment, or at least more friendly than where some other states have gone and are going. So this, and again, my colleagues and I this is simply good academics. We don't take any honorarium or consultant fees on this. We're just giving the facts. And it's really sad that the industry is so powerful that they have been able to obscure and mislead the public in just a major, major way. And they spent billions doing it, which of course, academics, we don't have.
Right. Well, I want to say to the folks that have taken the time to view this and to listen to the facts, let me say a couple of things. Number one, and I feel confident I'm speaking for Professor Kindt, for Phil, and for myself, we'd be happy to be challenged. We'd be happy to a public discussion. There's not a whole lot of time, but we can do it via Zoom, or if there's some other way that we can do it, we're happy to do that. Challenge us, press us, put the heat on us. We believe the evidence is in our favor. And let me say this to the religious folks of this area. Ask your preacher, where do you stand? Make him take a position. It breaks my heart. I know there's preachers out there that they've come out and they say, well, I'm not going to oppose it. I'm not for it, but I'm not going to oppose it. Make him take a stand. And then there are preachers who are actually for it, but they won't come out and say that. Make your preacher take a stand. Is that where you stand? And so I thank you both. Really, thank you a lot. And we hope that the good people of Bristol, Virginia will make a decision that will prosper them rather than end up cannibalizing the community. Thank you, John. Thank you, Phil.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.